we will get started. So, so glad to see so many parents already signing on, and I'm going to share my screen, which is a PowerPoint, and I'll be talking about this throughout. And the topic tonight is really motivating kids to repeat and repeat their positive social skills they're learning, whether it's at Camp Pegasus or if they're getting social skills at school when schools resume, or if your child goes to another private social skills therapy organization. The stuff we're going to be talking about are all the ways that you as caregivers can power up the child's motivation to repeat and repeat positive replacement skills, is what we call them, and decrease negative or more unwanted skills. So let's dive in. And what I'm talking about is the Camp Pegasus ARCH method, the ARCH method of social coping skills training. And so I like the image of the ARCH, besides the fact that it's a handy dandy acronym, because it's like an umbrella. It covers everything. And our approach really is to wrap around a child's whole life. And so when we talk, it's going to be a very holistic way of thinking about supporting a child with social skills. Another important piece is that just about any literature in the 2000s about social skills training or therapy states that social skills acquired in an office or just in a setting without connectivity between settings, between home and therapy and school, so this triangle, often can wind up being ineffective, because so many kids who have social skills challenges have a weakness in a cognitive skill or ability, which is called generalization. To generalize means to take something you learn in one setting and apply it in a different setting. And that is actually one area that many, but not all, of our campers have. So it really is important for a social skills therapy to wrap around a child's whole world, or be like an umbrella, arch-wise. So here are the 4 letters in our ARCH method. A is anticipate and teach. That's where we do the social skills training, but also you can anticipate. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Reinforce. We're going to be talking about a lot of reinforcement today. And the way that one reinforces a skill and the way a child acquires a skill is through creating very positive cycles, a lot of positive feedback, because people will strive to repeat and repeat things if they're getting this positive reinforcement. We're going to talk about negative reinforcement in a minute. The C in the ARCH method is compassionate coaching, because so many of our kids are getting corrected all the time, especially at school, but also at home and other settings. A lot of correction. There has to be a certain approach to coaching that's very compassionate and acknowledges and empathizes with the fact that this is hard. Your child has what equates to almost like a social learning disability. And we wouldn't harshly correct a child who has a learning, like a reading disability, like dyslexia. We shouldn't do the same with kids who have a social processing difference. So compassionate. And the H is what we did not get to in the last presentation a month ago. And the H, the holding environment, is what we're going to really expand upon the most tonight. And so that's creating boundaries for behavior. And that's where we're going to really power up building out the new positive skills you want to see in your child, and then also fading away and shrinking down some of those skills that are either unhelpful or unwanted. So I'm going to do a little review right now, because some of these skills are going to pertain to tonight's talk. So the A, an ARCH, anticipate and teach, right? So skill building. So wherever your child's getting it, at school or here at Camp Pegasus, most likely there's some kind of a curriculum. So your child's learning a skill. I just put up one of our posters. It's one of our core skills. One of the first 2 days every session, we always go over this. This is if-then action-reaction thinking. Often a weakness in most kids across diagnoses who have social skills challenges. And they often struggle to connect their behavior to other people's reactions. That also goes for behavior. Sometimes a parent will have a rule, child will get a consequence and they'll go, "You're mean, that's not fair." And they're not connecting. Their behavior is actually the cause of that. So action, reaction. For every if, there's a then. So we talk about this and kids learn about it. If I act blank, then kids will think something about me, feel something towards me, and do something towards me. But also that applies to adults and how kids navigate the real world. So we're going to come back to this. But the point of me showing a poster is we're anticipating. We're front-loading social skill instruction. Critical because your child most likely does not learn social skills inferentially just by living and navigating life. So the direct instruction is key. Now here's where you can begin to reinforce. These are sort of like having rules for home, but you can also include certain social skills in these expectations. We call them do rules. And for skills that you want to see your child repeat and increase in frequency, we call them increased behaviors, in contrast to decreased behaviors we're going to talk about later. And so you can parenthetically imagine the word do in front of any of these instructions. So do follow directions the first time you're asked. Do use your calming strategies. Do ask conversation questions. If your child is working on conversation skills, then you can make this one of your do rules. These are just samples. And I would say for young children, younger than 9, really 3 do rules is all they can handle. It's too many to juggle. It's better to work on 3 do rules, have them practice them, and then when a child gets really consistent with one, you can cross it off proudly, and then you can add a new do rule. So this is how the rules can grow with your child. So these are the do rules. And you can also, once you have a lesson, if you hear a lesson or read about it in our newsletter, and you go, whoa, this one really applies to my child, turn that into a do rule. Take some of the reinforcement tips from the newsletter, and then you can turn that into a do rule for home. And here's, and when you have do rules, it is not enough merely to say it, because your words, your verbal spoken words, they're invisible, they're just in the air. You really want to WPP them, write, publish, and post. So write them down, right? We're gonna write them down, put them out there, go over them with your child, and then put them up like on the fridge or in their room, somewhere where they can revisit them. And if you peek in the beginning of camp every day, we always repeat our rules. We WPP our rules. And you can see these are all do rules. Do, follow directions. Grown-ups must be in charge. Keep hands and feet to yourself, even if you're mad. This is from our face-to-face camp. Our kids don't have to restrain their hands and feet as much in Zoom. And so use kind words and voices. So WPP. So kids of social lessons, write 3, no more than 3 do rules, no more than 5 for a child 10 and older. And then you can put them to work. And we're gonna talk about how to expand on this, right? So now you've published your rules. Then we get into the R. So we've anticipated, you've done the pre-work. Now we're gonna reinforce. So now your child is out there in the world, just being, doing social. And so what you want to do is catch and reinforce. And we do that with TPR, targeted positive reflection. More on this. As I mentioned, we want to create positive reinforcement cycles. You want your child to, if your child executes a behavior or even a baby step towards a desired behavior, you need to attend to the positive. Notice that positive moment, even a baby step, and observe it, say it out loud. Then we, all right, so give TPR, targeted positive reflection, because we're going to reflect what your child does. So just by you noticing your child's positive behaviors and then say what you see, it's as if you're taking a snapshot of that moment. And as we're talking about building in or building out a positive cycle, when we correct our children a lot, we're taking a snapshot of that negative moment. Johnny, you're out of your seat again, right? Johnny, oh, that was rude. So we just made that real. So the word, the therapy word that I hate is validate. I validated his feelings. But in fact, the word valid means to make something real, right? To validate your ticket. It makes it real, it makes it valid. So well, why don't we choose to validate the behaviors we want to see the child do more? That's what's going to guarantee more and more repetition of behavior. So the types of things that you can give TPR for is social behaviors we're looking for, coping efforts, great job calming down, or you took a break, work habits, you are working so hard at that. You did not give up on that hard problem. So you can praise those things, and also decisions. What a great choice. That was a better choice, right? And here's just a little bit of language for you. And notice when you're giving TPR, it's all about you. You thought about his feelings for social behaviors. You were so flexible. If your child solves a problem, you did it. You figured it out by yourself, right? So it's you. If your child's with someone, you can give 2 kids TPR. You too worked it out. You siblings, oh my gosh, that was great. You solved that. You compromised. So that's the base. That's the very base of this positive cycle, and it really needs your effort. I teach this to teachers and faculties when I do consultations at school, and I want to create these positive cycles that are encouraging the kids to repeat their positive social skills. This I'm only going to mention because of its letter. I can't skip over the C, compassionate coaching. And as just a callback to our last presentation, we do it called Jeopardy style. And so it's question form. And you'll notice I'm underlining that in every one of the newsletters that I send home. There's always questions to ask your child. How do you think he handled that? How do you think he felt about you when you did that? Right? Did that work out for you or not? So all those question words are how we do coaching for some of the social faux pas or missed moments, right? But really, anticipate and teach, reinforce with TPR, and we're going to build that out now. And now we're going to get to the H. I've been holding out between the last presentation and tonight to talk about the H, the holding environment. That's actually an old therapy term from the 50s and 60s, but a holding environment are boundaries, and it's almost like creating a container for your child so the child feels safe, knows what to expect. And as we get to the next slides, we're going to talk about a reward system that amplifies your TPR. We're going to talk about consequences that will work if you use them properly with your child to help to decrease certain behaviors you want to fade away. And then we have deal breakers, which are those totally unacceptable things or things that do not work for your family. Okay, and so a therapeutic holding environment is much like swaddling a baby. And so again, wrapping around a child's whole world, the newborn, their nervous system is hypersensitive. When they're, not swaddled and their little limbs are all like flailing around, often they might cry more and they might feel anxious and they feel very vulnerable. When they're wrapped up tight, they are held. They're held tight and they actually feel good, right? They feel better. And that often can be a help for many, if not most, infants. We're going to use that idea with the behavior stuff that we're going to talk about today. So this is a home behavior program. From now on, for the rest of our talk tonight, we're going to be going over a home behavior program. And these are just ideas, and you can cherry pick different ones of these ideas that you might use at home. You don't have to use all of them, but you might identify your child as benefiting from certain ones of these. And so we're going to shape behavior in 360 degrees. So let's talk about behavior. Right, let's define or come to a shared working definition here. So we talk about the iceberg theory. So, this is a poster for grown-ups. The iceberg theory of emotion and behavior. So let's say this is you, you're in the ship, and you are navigating these waters, raising your child, and you have your telescope, you're being proactive, you're looking ahead, and out in the distance you see an iceberg. Well, you see the tip of the iceberg, right? That's usually all you can see. But you, as the wise captain of the ship, know that there's something more beneath the surface. It's usually something larger. Same thing with your child and behavior. So the behaviors that you see and hear, those are just the tip of the iceberg. So that's the very surface level of your child's experience. What supports all those and activates their behaviors are all the things beneath the surface that are kind of invisible. So they are thoughts, feelings, sensory experiences, memories, and also, I would add, even social deficits or weaker social skills that might lead to a behavior like a misbehavior, right? Or an ineffective behavior that comes out. But here's where we have to differentiate. And this is something that not many people are aware of. And this is why a lot of parents of kids of all ages actually make certain parenting miscues, because they think that all behaviors need the same response. Like all behaviors need a consequence, right? Or all behaviors need a reward, but that's actually not so. So there are two classes of behaviors on the tip of the iceberg. So one is the green, increased behaviors. I already mentioned them before, but to define them, these are all those behaviors and skills you want to see your child begin doing or do more of. So you want to see them increase these behaviors. And therefore, logically, decreased behaviors are those behaviors that are not working for your child or family, and you like to shrink those or fade them out, right? And they need vastly different responses. Increased behaviors need the positive cycle, beginning with TPR, and decreased behaviors they might decrease by themselves if your child is super focused on increasing behavior. More on that in a second. But sometimes your child might need help fading out a behavior, and that's what consequences are for, right? So we're going to begin by talking about increased behaviors. And we're going to talk about this positive reinforcement. Again, the foundation of that is TPR. And if you just did TPR, your child might feel the positivity and may start to execute more and more social and coping skills. However, for some kids, certain skills are just hard to execute for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're impulsive and they're just not thinking in the moment. Maybe they just have old habits, and even if an old habit is not the most effective, it's comfortable and it's familiar, right? Or maybe your child has just a great need for control and can be oppositional sometimes and just wants to say no to things. So there are just three, beneath the surface iceberg reasons why your child might have a hard time executing increased behaviors. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add external motivation. Your child is internally motivated in some of these cases to keep their status quo. So TPR helps, but if your child is stuck, adding an external reward can activate your child. This isn't for all the time. I've had some people who are educators say, reward, praise and rewards, those are like 4-letter words now. But in therapy and in the world of behavior change, that's not a 4-letter word. In fact, these are tools of the trade. So here's a family-friendly reward system that is not like your parents' old sticker chart, that very anal thing where you review the day and you sort of wind up playing gotcha games with your child because, and I experienced this in the earliest days, 20 years ago when I first started doing social skills, I had sticker charts, and at the end of a group, I'd review that hour with the kids, and I'd say, okay, rule number 3, ask a conversation question. And then the child didn't do it. So I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. You didn't get that reward. So they could have done 50 great things during that session, but because they didn't hit that one mark, now they're not going to get a reward. So that's one issue I have with sticker charts. Also, most parents tell me that they get bored of them, and everyone gets bored of them and they forget about them. But secondly, kids with social skills challenges often sort of bop throughout their day without a lot of self-awareness. So When you are giving TPR and you're taking that snapshot of the moment, you're helping your child realize, oh, I did that. So for one thing, you're building real-time awareness. And now we're going to add a real-time reward system, buck system. And this is what we, especially when we're in our face-to-face, our live Camp Pegasus, we have paper clips and we're dishing out paper clips, what we call chips. But for home, we're going to call it the buck system. And it is not anal. It is sloppy. It's relationship-based. You can be enthusiastic if your child does something really hard. That's great. And then we have carnival-style prizes. So here's what it looks like. So it begins with you and your child creating some bucks, some funny money. You can use Monopoly money, or you can make your own. Just take a piece of copy paper and well, we're going to get into that in a second. So create the bucks, and then you're ready to hand them out. So we have the cutout ones. Then you, in collaboration with your child, come up with 3 levels of prizes. So now it's almost like Dave and Buster's, or it's a carnival, you know, and more on that in a second. And then usually on a weekend, you can count up your child's bucks, and then a weekend day is a great time to go for the prize. That's a happy emoji getting ice cream. So here's how to do it. So take your paper, take a copy paper, and fold it in half 3 times. So fold it in half the long way, then you fold it in half again, and now you wind up with 8 roughly equal-sized rectangles. You can then add the black lines to to really make the borders pop. You can, here in this slide, you can see I pre-structured this for, this is for a school actually. I pre-structured it, and you can see there's a circle, just like our money often has like a circle for the president. But then the child can decorate it any way he or she wants. So they have some ownership over their bucks. Then, if you have access to just a home printer copier, you can copy it, make 8 copies, so now you have 64 bucks. Or you can just have the child and you, as a family, you can draw as many of these as you want. If you don't have access to a copier right now, that's fine. So you wind up with a ton of bucks, right? Then every morning, you take a big wad of these bucks and you shove it in your pocket or your bag, and you're walking around all day, still giving your TPR, great eye contact. You are so flexible. What a great conversation question. And now you're attaching bucks to it, right? So you can give these bucks for any positive thing, give like 1 buck for any positive thing. If your child holds the door for someone and is thoughtful, do that. If your child brings their plate to the sink, after dinner to the counter, that's great. Give them a buck. So you're building this baseline, and then if you have, remember that you've WPP'd your do rules, you can give bonus bucks for the do rules. So now there's everyday things, a buck here and buck there, but I'm going to give you 5 bucks if you can really work on, not hitting your sister, right? If you can go take that break instead of hitting your sister, that's worth 5 bucks. Let's see if you can do it. And so you can assign different buck amounts. You can also give them sort of liberally. Let's say you're working on self-regulation with your child, and your child's been trying to calm down, but it melts down, gets upset, and then there's the first time your child successfully does it, avoids the meltdown that always would have plagued him or her. You should throw the bucks at your child and just be so enthusiastic. You did it! That was the best, and just like throw the bucks at them, because that first time is the breakthrough moment. See, that's why I said, remember, we called it sloppy. It's a sloppy reward system. So you can just use your enthusiasm and have your voice match how excited you are for your child's success. And so you're giving the bucks. I encourage you to have kind of like a central location, maybe in the kitchen or somewhere, where your child can have access to the bucks. And he or she can go there and count them and sort of be involved in the growing numbers. And then your child can really sort of get wrapped up in this, oh, what am I trying to achieve here? And then we get to the prize options, right? Here's the carnival style prizes with 3 levels, small, medium, and large. And prizes do not have to be material or monetary for that matter. Prizes can be a preferred activity. It could be like 15 minutes on the iPad in a bonus 15 minutes. It could be a family outing. We have, some preferred social activity that is rare but special. Sleep over with the cousins. So you can, brainstorm this. It's really helpful, again, if your child is involved in the brainstorming for the prize levels. But you're the gatekeeper. You're still in charge. So if your child says, I want to get the, the Death Star Lego set, which is, I don't know, like $700, you can be like, well, that's not really going to be on this price chart too much, but you can say like, a large prize could be, $5, but whatever's your family values. So and if you want it to be not material at all or not food, that's your say. So you always set the limits on what the prizes are, and you sort of lock them in for now, and then you can go back to TPRing, and you're giving them bucks, and it feels so positive. You're looking to catch and praise, and you build these positive cycles for the child. And what you'll start to see is, with all the positivity, your child will think just a little harder about his or her actions. And that's what we're looking for. That's the social thinking that you want your child eventually to do independently. But in order to get your child over the hump for these sticky behaviors, this is what this is for. Okay. A couple notes on prizes. One, I added this little wrinkle later because some kids, the minute they got to their prize threshold, they said, like, let's say it was a Wednesday. Okay, we gotta go. Like, it's after school. It's like 7 o'clock at night. We have to go to Five Below, or we have to go for ice cream. The parents said, no, like, pump the brakes. It's 7 o'clock on a Wednesday. We can't do it. And sometimes that turned into power struggles. So we said, all right, all prizes are on the weekend, and you can schedule out what's the best day on a weekend to do it. Are we super busy on Saturday? Would Sunday be better for our outing or whatever it is? So I just softly suggest, out of experience, make, cashing in prizes on a weekend, and then you can really sort of schedule it more. Second thing that parents often ask, can you lose bucks? For the most part, my blanket statement is no. And my thought is, these are good deeds. These are positive actions. And I think it's very demoralizing for the child who is in negative cycles in the world to be they're working towards this goal, they're getting these bucks, they did these positive actions, and then suddenly they've lost it for a new action. So for the most part, I would say no. If you have a child who is particularly like volatile or destructive, that's the one exception where you might add like you can lose $5 or something. That's like a deal breaker behavior. More on that in a minute. But otherwise, really, for the most part, try not to have kids lose their rewards because they earn them, and so it would just be a shame for them to not lose them. There are other consequences that you use, we're going to talk about right now. Right, so that is really the crux of the positive cycles for increased behaviors is TPR, catch them being good, quote unquote, with your words, and then if you really want to power it up, you can attach the bucks to it. Now, but let's shift to some of those behaviors that are not working for your child and for your family. Okay, so we're going to talk about decreased behaviors, and these are some behaviors that you want to fade out. First, if you are really investing properly in the TPR and even the bucks, you will be, your house is going to feel good. It's going to feel very positive. I think you're going to enjoy the feeling of giving so many compliments and praises because it's going to have everyone's brains squirting out all these pleasure chemicals in your body. It's going to feel very close. An interesting thing happens. When you're all kind of focused on the do rules and on the positive, often some of the unhelpful, unwanted behaviors that aren't too major, they start to disappear on their own. They just fade away because the child's so much more focused on the positive replacement behaviors. So that's one piece. We call that targeted ignoring. So we're going to ignore most very minor things and really focus on the positive. But now there are some behaviors that you really want to shape. And once again, we're going to WPP it. These are going to be rules that are no rules. So it's the opposite of do rules. Only there's a difference. For any no rule that you write, for a behavior that you want to now see your child do less, or try to do less, you want to add a replacement behavior. This is one thing that most parents and teachers miss. Because if we could just ask a child to stop doing something and they could do it, it would be golden. But your child can't just stop because we ask them to. What do you do instead? That's the key here. So you can see the top bullet point, no talking back. If that's an issue in your house, if you're getting back talk, no talking back, just say okay or I hear you. So now your child has a target to shoot for. Okay, we're going to be listening for every time you say okay or I hear you, and that'll be a buck. We're going to notice that. We're going to give you credit for doing that. No hitting or kicking, right? Walk away and take a break. So there's the positive replacement behavior. So that is so key. I can't underline that enough. Positive replacement behaviors with any no rule, right? No insults or hurtful speech. Consider others' feelings. Choose nothing, neutral or nice. we've said in the past. And you can see, even for meltdowns or shutdowns, we're going to see if you can do that less. We might not consequence that, but instead, ask for help. That's the positive replacement behavior. And this is one of the rules that we go over every morning in our this summer. The top one, no interrupting. But look at the positive replacement behaviors that we have. Do, wait your turn to talk. They're like do rules. And do, mute your microphone until it's time, right? So here's what we want you to avoid, and here's what we want you to replace it with. All right, so now we're gonna get into consequences. So because, let's say that you've written your no rules, right? That's a pretty good start. That begins to give your child expectations and a target to shoot for. But still, so many kids who I see for therapy and in camp, again, as I mentioned earlier, they just miss that connection between their behavior and the outcome and the consequences. So we want to teach this if-then thinking. And in the end, as kids get older, if you can execute this basic concept with a lot of repetition, you should expect your child, being a child, to repeatedly mess up until they don't anymore. So they're going to need a lot of repetition, but over time, you'll help to increase your child's responsibility and independence. So here's how to implement if-then thinking at home. And the message is basically, if you do X, then Y happens, right? For older kids, I have a line that I use with them, or I say, choose the outcome you desire, right? Choose the outcome you want. And so if you decide or allow yourself to do a certain unacceptable behavior, then you're basically choosing to have this consequence when you do X, right? You're choosing it. That's a really unusual way to talk about it, but that's essentially what it is. They might be passively choosing it. I'm not saying that your child is intentionally, doing this behavior. I'll disclose. So when my son was in middle school, he got his first smartphone. I was obsessed with it. It was attached to his hip, and we had a rule in our house that all phones, including parents, needed to stay on the first floor, like the kitchen, family room floor, and nothing in the bedroom floor. A couple times, he wound up sneaking his phone up there. So, and we're like, oh, all right, this is not okay. You're breaking the family rule. So we said, from now on, Sam, if you do then you're going to lose the phone the next day. So we did an if-then, and he got better at it, but then he fell off the wagon, and he actually snuck. So he thought, okay, I'm going to get around these parents. I'm going to outsmart them. I'm going to stow it somewhere. Well, we were like tucking him in to bed one night. We were like going in there, and then yeah, he tucked it somewhere, but someone, called him or texted him, and so it flashed. So we saw a light coming from, the wall side of his bed. We're like, oh, now you're being sneaky. So that was a new behavior. We didn't have a no rule about sneakiness. So now we're like, oh, this is, sneakiness is even worse than the violation, because now you're sort of lying. So, and this is a big deal for relationships. So we said, all right, from now on, if you're being sneaky with your phone, you lose it for a week. It's that important to our family. All right, so you have a choice. So you can keep it downstairs and just keep your phone, right? Choose the outcome you desire. And sure enough, he had to test it a couple times. But after ninth grade, he was really responsible with his phone. He always checked it. All the chargers were downstairs. So again, we're shaping behavior. It's an ongoing conversation, but this is how you can use all this. Notice the bottom bullet point. For this to work, and this is another oopsie that parents make, often, so let's say my son, he snuck it. I was pretty, offended and disappointed, but right then, if I were like, oh, you lose your phone for a month, that would be me punishing out of anger, A. B, we didn't name that. We didn't sort of name that as an actual rule. And so if we give him this super heavy-handed punishment, or, I'll call it a punishment because it's reactive on my part, then he's just mad. It was unexpected. What? You never said this. Your kids might have said this to you. This was never a rule. This was never a thing. So it feels unfair. It's almost like changing the rules on someone in the middle of the game. So what I suggest is, if your child, shows you a new behavior that's not okay, don't consequence him for that first time. Chalk that up to like, you lost one little battle, but you're not going to lose the war. So then you go ahead and be like, we need to WPP a rule for this. So we can do a no rule with a positive replacement behavior, or just go with a do rule, right? Get it down, make it real, make it permanent and predictable. Here we go. Make it predictable so your child has to choose. If you're surprising your child with a consequence, he never had a choice. It was just their mess up and then your reaction. So consequence is predictable. This is why you WPP it, write, publish, and post. Make it real and make it permanent, right? We want to anticipate. So yes, your child is going to mess up that first time. That'll highlight the need for a new rule, and then you can give them an if-then. Make sense? All right? So that's the big picture of this. Here are two options for consequences. And I want to underline also, I use the word punish, and punishment is sort of an old school term that has to do with punishment and control of a child. But I think that we have a different aim, and I encourage parents to approach parenting and behavior change more as a teaching and learning framework, right? Is your child learning what he needs to learn from your consequences, right? My dad, in my household growing up, my dad yelled and screamed. One time I was 12, I was jumping up and down on my bed. It was a metal framed trundle bed. I broke it, I snapped it because I was much too old to be jumping on my bed. And my dad, came up and he heard the bang. What happened up here? I was like, I broke my bed. He went wild. My most precious thing in my life was my comic book collection. And he took my comic books, which was a large collection by the time I was 12. He put them in a suitcase and he took them away for 3 months. Now, I would say that's a little heavy-handed as a punishment. Of course, I remember it. I'm telling you to this day. But I would have learned the same message if he took it away for a week. So punishment is sort of the degree, and it's also the attitude, and it's also if you're doing it reactively, right? If I knew that I was going to lose my comic books for jumping on my bed, I definitely wouldn't have done that. All right, let's go to natural consequences on this slide. All right, so natural consequences are life happens. Your child does something, he or she is not responsible with maybe a toy or an object, or let's say they lose their homework. Well, instead of like you running around calling every teacher or all the kids in your kid's grade, or let's say that your child leaves his scooter outside and it gets rusty, and your child's like, oh, my scooter, it's rusty, that's not as fast anymore. You say, well, this is your scooter and you left it out, right? So this is helping your child see action, reaction, right? And then you say, well, did this work for you, right? Now, the amount of responsibility that you give your child has to be age appropriate. If your child is 5 and 6 and they left it out, I would expect my 5, 6-year-old to probably leave it out. So I might not consequence them now. I'll try to help remind them. But for an older child, you sort of want to go by what you would think age appropriate expectations are. So then your child's like, oh man, my scooter's rusty. Well, you left it out, see? So it's really important that you take care of your stuff, right? That was something we talked about, actually. At the end of the day, we even asked you to put it away. Same thing with homework. Your child, so if you don't rescue, right, then you say, okay, well, how did this work out for you? Right? You have to go to your teacher and say, I don't have it. So now, what can you do tomorrow? Right? How did this work out? What can you do tomorrow to make sure this doesn't happen again? So you're using the leverage of life to have these discussions about responsibility. I know that there's an emotional component to this, and your child might get upset, obviously. And that absolutely can happen, and I would expect it to happen. And your child's allowed to feel frustration. Consequences apply frustration. They give a child, it's like a little inoculation. Little doses of frustration throughout childhood help your child grow into a resilient adult, because we have bigger frustrations to handle, right? Bigger things to worry about, and there's a lot more to lose. So it's important for your child to experience the frustration that comes with natural consequences. And then on the back end, your question, your Jeopardy coaching, question form is, how did that work out for you, right? Did that work out well? Did that not? What do you think? Would you do that the same way again, or would you do it differently? What would you do differently? These are all the questions that you can ask when you allow some natural consequences to unfold. Okay. A second option is, here's where you would be giving sort of what might seem like an arbitrary consequence. Sorry, no, this is not that. This is a logical consequence where your child can link what their thing they're being separated from. So if your child is being mean to a sibling, then you separate your child from the sibling, right? Nope, you two separate, right? You're not being kind to each other. So logical consequences are separating the child from the person or object they're not, quote unquote, using properly. If your child's being too rough with a toy, with a remote control, oh, sorry, you can ask them to stop. If they don't stop, sorry, we need to have a break from that. You can have it again tomorrow. This is what we did with my son with the phone, right? Because he was literally, the phone was the object of the violation. And so you lose the object if you're not using it properly. If you have the common power struggle with your child about getting off of screens, you can have terms of use. You can write and publish terms of use. Get off of your device, your iPad, your computer, whatever, within 5 minutes of being asked. If you don't, then you lose it the next day. Or you can say, or you lose it, later tonight if there's a second use of it. So you can write and publish if then, and you have terms of use, and you'll train your child, because with repeated exposures to losing that, your child gets little doses of frustration. He or she may get upset, even tantrum the first couple times. But on the back end, you say, well, this is the rule. And the cool thing about writing, publishing, and posting is, in a way, you partly own it, but you also disown it. You can say, well, it's not me, it's that rule on the wall there. Just blame the rule. So you have this nice little convenient out. I'm sorry, it's just a rule, it's written there. If you do this, then that happens. So, and repeated bumping into your actionable consequence is the teaching tool. Your child feels the frustration and will then be more open to finding some solution. Here are some if-thens for you, right? If you're unkind to someone, then you need to perform some kind of a gesture to make amends, right? Maybe you write them an apology card, right? A little note. Maybe you do something else that might make amends. If you mess up or break something, then after you calm down, you'll need to fix it. Or you might have to work it off if it's a really big repair. Some families have used this to great effect as a teaching tool. Again, not punishment, teaching. If you use your phone, and we got this already, then we're going to hold it the rest of the day. I seem to go back to the phones and the devices a lot, don't I? And so out of the ashes, your phoenix will rise. So out of each of these behavioral mess-ups, with your consistent, being sort of that brick wall of a consequence, your child will keep bumping into that same consequence that's predictable. And at that point, they start to realize, wait a minute, I don't know if I want to keep banging my head against that brick wall. Maybe I want to do something different. That's what a consequence is for. And then you can work with them, brainstorm, and then you go right back to your TPR and rewards and your bucks if you're using bucks. Make sense? So consequence, as soon as a consequence is over, clean slate, you're not holding a grudge, and you're right back to the praise, targeted praise. All right. In these last 15, 13 minutes of our time together, I want to talk about deal breakers. These are the hardest behaviors to deal with because often they can be dangerous or destructive. Your child may be bullying or threatening to you or someone in the family to try to sort of like be big and powerful to get out of something. In other cases, it could be just complete refusals, like shutdown behavior. Like, no, if you're trying to, have a coaching conversation with your child and your child's just totally refusing, no, and maybe even acting up to get out of it. Oppositional behavior, or if your child, flips the I don't care switch. All of these behaviors are the ones that are most counter to development. And in fact, I would say that these are destructive to the child's development because the top two are eruptions. It feels out of control. And the bottom three is your child over controlling the environment and refusing to get on the program, right? And I worked with so many kids, especially in therapy, but a couple at Camp Pegasus where they were like that. And if they have that much control, it's actually very dangerous for them because they're really forcing the parent's hand and being like, no, I'm not going to grow up. I refuse to talk about your positive things, right? I'm going to stay just as I am and you can't make me, right? So here's where it gets tricky, but we want to overcome resistance. So here I have Bugs Bunny, the conductor. You're going to be like a conductor of an orchestra of your child. We're going to try to overcome some of this resistance with what we call forced breaks. Sometimes we call them forced boredom breaks. Sometimes we call them forced problem-solving breaks. Okay. So the message is, let's say that you've been trying to have a conversation with your child about an important social behavior, right? Or like a certain, behavior or an avoidance behavior that they're doing, but they keep avoiding, they keep shutting it down. You still have the leverage as the parent, as the conductor. So I really empower you tonight to say like, wait, time out. We cannot go on with this day. We are pausing this day. Nothing else is happening at this point until we can talk about this, until we can go over this, right? And so that's the message. Now, before we get to this ultimatum, I should say, for the child who's very controlling and they're like, no, I don't want to talk about this. I would say there's one step that I would say that's not in the PowerPoint, but I want to say to you tonight is before you get to ultimatum land, I would say it's helpful if you give them some choice and say, you know what, okay, we can talk about this now, or we can talk about this later, but you need to give me a time and I'm going to hold you to it, right? So that's sort of what's called an acceptable choice. Okay, we're going to talk about this. We can talk about this now or later, but later is coming. Like we are going to talk about it. So what do you want to do? Get it over with or talk about it like after dinner? After dinner, okay, I'm going to hold you to it. And then this slide would kick in. Now it's after dinner. And your child's like, no, come on, I want to go, I want to go play, I want to go relax. Sorry, we're pressing pause on this night. Nothing else can happen until we get to this. So that's where you are the maestro, right? We have a problem-solving worksheet that I don't have in the slide. It's too long to explain for the amount of time that we have, but I can share this with you another time. Right, so that's the first thing. It's a boredom break. We're going to slow things down until we can attack this thing. All right, and now I have the doozy. And this is something I learned 15 years ago in a wonderful workshop for professionals. So it's called the family plan versus the kid plan. And it does two things. One, it really helps your child discriminate between, oh, my oppositionality isn't good for me. This isn't what the whole family is about. And two, it's actually a counterintuitive thing for the child because you wind up putting all of the control and responsibility on them. So check this out. The message is, you decide. You decide when you're going to get your life back. And the short title for this is, it's a grounding program. This should only be used if you also have bucks going on. If your child can be that oppositional, I would insist that you need to have both the TPR, right? Very heavy praise, 7-to-1 or 10-to-1 praise to correction. And I would even add, the bucks. You should add reward system. For older kids or teens, you might not have actual bucks. That might feel a little bit too kiddie, but you can have credits. Give them credits, and then add up the credits at the end of the day, or have your child, add them up. All right. So the message is, first, these next two slides have a script for you. And Aviva sent you a copy of this PowerPoint, so you have it. And so you can feel free to take it. You can put it on, you can copy it, you can edit it for your own language, whatever you want to do. So first bullet point, we're going to define this idea of the kid plan versus the family plan. So, hey, we have a Fogel family plan. And then you have the Johnny plan. So we're going to call Johnny as my client. And we want you to enjoy everything that you like to do, right? And when you follow our family rules, when you're doing the do rules and really working on stuff, you're on the family plan, right? And you get to keep doing all the things that you enjoy. But if you're not on the Johnny plan, if you're on the Johnny plan rather, the Johnny plan is not the family plan. The Johnny plan, you're doing whatever you want to do, right? You might ignore our directions, you might refuse to do whatever, right? So here we've laid it out, the difference between the family plan, you're following directions, and the Johnny plan, you're doing your own thing, right? Right? Now here's the you decide part. On the family plan, and this is, parenthetically, let me pause. Parents, sometimes we, including myself, forget that TV, video games, Legos, these things are all privileges. These are not in the Bill of Rights. These are not, God-given right. You have the inalienable right to Lego, right? But for some reason, we all kind of get sucked into this expectation that, oh no, my child has to have it. It's expected. It's sort of like everyone just expects it. And we forget that this is a bargaining chip. Preferred activities. And so really, okay, back to our script. So on the family plan, you have a lot of privileges. You have TV, video games, you have all your fun stuff when you're on the family plan. But those aren't rights, right? What you have a right to is a roof over your head, and meals, and a bed, and I promise you will always have that. But if you're just on your own program, if you're on the Johnny plan, you don't have those privileges. No, not anymore, right? So if you choose, right, here we go with the choice part. If you choose not to cooperate, or if you choose to be mean to your sister, you're also choosing not to have those privileges. You decide, right? From now on, here we're doing if then. If you choose the family plan, then you keep all your fun privileges. If we're going to schedule a social coaching conversation, if we're going to talk about something, it has to happen, right? That's the family plan. If you refuse, you're choosing to ground yourself. Key on that language. You're choosing to ground yourself. These are just the rules. We're going to write these down. These are written down, right? if then, you're choosing to ground yourself. So you see, you have all the control. If you have a child who leans towards being oppositional, if they have a great deal of need to control everything, you're actually, this is why it's counterintuitive for the child. It's almost like reverse psychology. You have all the control. You're going to decide what plan you're on and whether you have your privileges. Then it's up to you to follow through. This will be toothless if you don't follow through. So you might have to go around the house and take away all the remotes, for that evening into the next day until your child comes around. You might have to, take the iPad, whatever, right? And so it disappears. And the message is, you can have all this back. You can have your preferred favorite stuff back, right? When you decide to get on the family plan. And now you have to outlast your child. And your child might have a fit. It might be a tantrum. And I have another talk where we can talk about how to handle tantrums. I'll follow that up. That'll be a series that I'm going to do during the school year that's free for the community. But for now, you know that there's going to be a consequence on this, but you hold firm. If you hold firm, we've done this at camp. We've paused the child, said, no, camp can't go on. You are not listening to your counselors. You are jumping back and forth across the creek and refusing to listen. That is not safe. So starting now, your day is paused, right? And we froze the child, and we did the same language, the Camp Pegasus plan versus the Johnny plan, and we just waited. He got bored, he got angry, he was name calling, and he got real huffy and threatening, and he was like, oh, fine. And that's what you want to get to. You want to get to fine, right? When the child finally relents, you say, okay, you go right back to praise. The targeted TPR, you go right back to great choice. You decided. You get it? So this is the way to sort of turn things around if you have that child who is doing deal breaker behaviors. So in conclusion, here's what we did, right? We did a review of anticipate, reinforce, and just touched on compassionate coaching, right? And then we did a deep dive into the behavioral component, how you can shape behaviors. Go heavy, heavy, heavy with the TPR. That's, right? And then we're going to, if you want to power that up, if your child is a little bit sickly or stubborn, go with the bucks, right? You're gonna go with the relationship-based reward system. Have fun with that. Make your house feel really fun, trying to achieve these positive replacement behaviors. And then we're going to focus on if then with the different kinds of consequences on the back end. And again, ensuring that they are predictable, right? Publish and post, right? Then we talked about that plan. There we go. So I know I shared a lot in one tight hour of me talking. I'd be happy to stay on and answer any questions that you have for as long as you have questions. This is tricky. This is not easy. We just put 1 hour in, but this is something that can take a lot of sort of ongoing work, consultation. I'm always here to help beyond camp if you have questions. But I'll be quiet now. And if anyone has a question about any of the slides or ideas, feel free to go ahead and I'll just be quiet. I'll pull up my chat as well if you want to chat it to me. You can also just type it in and I can keep an eye on that as well.
I have a question. Are there someone else that had a question?
Okay, great.
So it says Anna, but I'm actually Hannah. That's my wife's name.
Okay.
Our son was in the virtual camp for 2 weeks ago. So
okay.
It's been a little bit. He's 9 and he does a lot of the deal breaker behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, in doing this consequences or this thing that you've laid out, how long do you think in general it takes for them to break that? Because we've done that intermittently, and the fits are hours and hours of, you know, screaming, crying, yelling, flailing, and it's like exhausting.
Yes.
And then the next time we're like, I can't deal with it.
Yeah.
So, like, how many weeks, months? It's probably child dependent, but I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it is child dependent. There's such a variability of responses. First, I would say I would begin without consequences. I would begin with a couple weeks of the TPR, and I would add bucks. So you want to add that external positive reinforcement and try to get, you know, some positive cycles in there, and just reward any moments where your child is making the choice to cooperate, to comply. Like, yes, great listening. That's what we're looking for. Great listening. Awesome. You know, and so on. So and again, it's almost like a 7-to-1 or 10-to-1 ratio of.
Okay. Do you want me to floss you and do your medicine?
Oh, can someone mute yourself, please? So that's my first thought, is go heavier, actually go really intensive with the positive stuff to try to build any kind of positive movement. And you might start to see more and more cooperation around that piece. And then, you know, weeks in, I might add, you know, a pre-written consequence saying, if then, you can expect it. And I actually believe that depending on the child, you know, you will see there is a pretty common pattern to tantrums, which is the first tantrum is the I'm upset tantrum. Okay, the first time, epic, very long. The second time, your child will tantrum. It's almost like if you look at a graph, tantrum, start to calm down, be like, let me try a little harder, right? So in the same tantrum, like, and they'll ratchet up to an even higher level. And you're like, oh my God, and you're like being blown away, like the Memorex commercial in the 80s. And then the third tantrum, often, so the third time you've held this line, you'll see, you know, super intense early, shorter than others. You know, looks like these grown-ups aren't going to give, and then it sort of plateaus and goes down. And then often we see a decreasing. Now, I can't guarantee the rule of 3 with this, but I mean, so your child might have 2 of the first type, 2 of the second type, you know, so I can't guarantee how long it takes overall, but I think there is a pretty predictable arc to it. If you can weather the storm, and really anything that I said today requires consistency. That's everything that I said today is complete BS if you are not consistent with it, and if you don't really persist as well. So consistent and persistent, because, and one thing, and this is not a blame the parent statement, but a lot of times when people come to me for therapy with their child, and they're like, oh yeah, we tried X, Y, or Z, and some of the things are actually things that I suggest, but like we gave up after a little while, or we stopped, or, you know, we forgot. And so you actually do have to play the long game. So this is where I think, just for you, it comes back to, how can you care for yourself, and how can you do self-care during COVID, in regular life, but it's even harder, but trying to find ways that you can care for yourself, nurture yourself, and recharge your batteries, because it is very hard, especially the early breaking of the stallion part. Is that a fair answer?
Yeah, no, that's helpful.
Yeah. And I see a question was typed in, was chatted. I mentioned that I do therapy. Is that outside of Pegasus? Would it be possible to have a session or 2 with my son? We can follow up with email. Yes, absolutely. So year round. So I've been a child and adolescent therapist for 25 years. I have my own private practice that has grown to 4 locations and 10 art therapists, and we're all child and adolescent specialists. And so it's called the Child and Family Art Therapy Center. Kids don't have to do art. We also do verbal therapy and play therapy as well. So we're just child specialists, and we also work with parents on a lot of these types of home programs. So yes, and I'll just mention the 4 locations are, we have one in Haverford, in Paoli, in Plymouth Meeting, and in Center City. So pretty much in all of the near Delaware Valley counties except for Bucks. So yeah, so absolutely, we can talk about that offline. Any of you, if you want to reach me directly in the newsletter, at the end of the social lesson summary that I write up each time, there's a link that goes right to my email. So you can email me directly about any private therapy that you'd like. And 2 of the other experienced staffers at Camp Pegasus, the 2 art people, are also in my practice. That's Miss Bree and Mr. Don. So they also are great resources and would know your child. Great, thanks for that question. Any other questions that I can answer?
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Okay.
You have 2 children. One is a Camp Pegasus camper, and the other is not. She's a couple years younger.
Mm-hmm.
We have sort of different areas that they're working on in their lives, and like our son does not like going outside, and our daughter, you can't get her inside sometimes.
Huh?
So you expect so for something where they have very different areas that we're trying to focus them on, for the if-then type things, is it better to be a little more generic and have rules that apply to both of them, or more specific and tailor it to the individual?
That's a really helpful question. I would say each child can have, well, your son could have 3, your daughter being that young could have like 1 or 2, do rules. But then this buck system, if you do a buck system to really help power things up, it's generic enough that you could just be like giving the TPR to both kids, this targeted reflection. And in fact, some families do that just for the whole crew, the whole group of kids, because that doesn't make the identified, camper or client feel, identified. I'm not different than the rest of the kids. Everyone's working on something. So some families just like to import that and use that for everyone, because every kid has stuff they can work on, so you can do it that way. But I wouldn't make it, you can have 1 or 2 very generic ones that your family or any family would have, like use kind words, use respectful tones of voice, right? You can have that. But then I absolutely would have some tailored to the specific behaviors that you would like to see your child perform. And if you think about it, one little exercise that I recommend is for you, as an exercise, apart from your kids, sit down at a table with just a blank piece of paper and write down, just start brainstorming all the things you'd like to see your child do, right? It could be 10 or 11 or 15 items long. It could be long, but then go back over it and just put a star next to them and prioritize, right? Okay, if you had in your mind, what is the most important behavior that I want to see my child work on right now that would make a big difference in his or her life or our family? That would be do rule number 1. And you go second. So you're prioritizing that way. With that question in your mind, what do rule would make the biggest impact on our family, immediately, and we'll work on those 2 or 3. And the others are for future. And again, as I said, as your child gets good and gets, sort of expert at repeating one of his or her behaviors, cross it right off, have a celebration, go out for ice cream or something, and be like, yeah, you did it. Oh, but that was getting so easy. Here's a new one, right? So then you can move another one up. So it can just grow with your child and get more sophisticated.
Great, thanks. I had a quick follow-on, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned like one of the hallmarks is structure and and our son definitely thrives on structure.
Mm-hmm.
The nature of my job is I'm on call sometimes, I'm on back shift sometimes.
Ooh, mm-hmm.
Take phone calls. They can at any moment now my phone call can ring and I might feel. Is there any in that definitely sort of affect the life of my job, but also that will set off some emotion sometimes when I have to go and answer a call. Is there any, I know that's a very specific scenario, But for
It
someone that's
is.
focused on structure, where there is this inherent distraction, is there any tidbits there to help with that?
Yeah, yeah. This is tricky, but your family is not alone in this. But this is tricky because here we have a child that thrives on predictability, right, and sameness. But there's a certain reality, there's a truth to your life, which is your job, your life has built in unpredictability, right, or inconsistency. So I would suggest that he would do well to have maybe like a private coping skill lesson or social lesson about this, where, you know, not to be my practice, you know, could really work with him on this, you know, privately outside of camp. Hey, but as a part of the languaging, what you want to do is in this sort of coping skill lesson, have it be visual, and then say like, you know what, let's make this unpredictability predictable. So we're going to name it. So everyone, we know that daddy, you know, sometimes has these pop-up phone calls or these surprise. So we name it. So let's get used to that. How can we get used to that? Can we make a plan for what you're going to do, right? When a pop-up surprise thing happens. So partly we can't take away your responsibilities, but by naming it and making a plan, we can decrease, I think, his reactivity to it, right? By having a plan, and then you can reward execution of that plan. Oh my gosh, you went and did your favorite common thing when daddy had to run out for that phone call. Bucks for you, woohoo, great job. You handled it. We also have, I have a concept of the handler. I have like a character that I talk about with kids, you know, so we'll have a contrast, the freaker outer or the handler, or the decider, like the person who's very negative. I know this is gonna stink, everything's bad, you know, versus the handler. But ultimately the handler character is like this superhero who can just handle everything that comes his or her way. And would you rather be the freaker outer or would you rather be the handler? So we talk about it in this kind of playful way. We'll make a superhero out of it. And then, well, how would the handler handle it if your dad had a pop-up meeting or something, you know? And by naming it pop-up or something, it's also cuter, you know, so we can sort of language it and see if that could start to help, you know? So that's how I would that's my response to that.
Great, thank you.
I'm glad you asked that question. I bet that might help another family as well. Because life is unpredictable. We can't script out everything, unfortunately. That's my big lament. What else? Very good. Oh. Great. Yeah, someone else is saying that was beneficial. So thanks for that question. Yeah. All right. Well, I am available to you if you think of questions another time. Once you know me at camp, you can always reach out to me with any kind of clinical question. If I can answer it just in a phone call, I can. I'll be happy to do that. If it looks like it's more involved and we might need to help with a couple sessions, that's also on the table, you know, whatever it takes. But we're just so grateful that you're sharing your child with us. We love what we do. We're just so passionate about it. And we are just happy to have, and the campers bring us joy during these hard times as well. So we're just really glad to be together. And thank you for taking so much time out of your busy lives to join me tonight. So it sounds like we're mostly done. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. And
Thank you.
see your kids at camp. Okay, bye.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome. All right, night, everybody.